Here we go. Hello.
Hi, Isabel. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you too. Thanks for making yourself available for me.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm always looking forward to interesting conversations, so it's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for making the time. So I always do this when I have a guest is I get started with to talk about yourself, because I think you have a very interesting background. So maybe
Thank
you
you.
get started by sharing, where you're from, how you ended up in Switzerland, and how you picked up your career there.
Thank you. Happy to do that. My name is Karina Schneider. I come from the Philippines originally. I was born there, and I had my education in the Philippines. I studied psychology for my university degree, and pretty quickly moved into human resources as my profession. So I've gained about 18 years now of experience in HR. And back in 2010, there was an opportunity from my employer to participate in a 2 year rotational program for early in career talent, specifically within human resources. And not having had the experience of working internationally and living internationally, there was a your gut sometimes speaks to you and says this is something you need to try. So it was a pure act of courage and leap of faith to um, put my name in the hat, as to apply for the program, and I did, and miraculously got accepted. So I spent the next 2 years, so between 2011 and 2013, doing different roles in human resources in different parts of the world. So I spent some time in Switzerland, sometime in Costa Rica, and sometime in San Francisco. Got exposure to different parts of human resources, and also exposure to different perspectives, like the global perspective, the regional perspective, and the local perspective. So it was a very interesting time. And at the end of the program, I managed to find a full time role back in Switzerland. So I've actually been in Switzerland since 2013. So that's about 9 years now. And I've just grown in my career since then until recently when I decided to step aside from corporate. So that's a little bit of a professional history from my side.
I'm just going back on the how you made it to Switzerland because most people, especially non-EU citizens, the big question is
Um,
how do you make your first move to Switzerland, knowing that you will have potentially a permit issue? So, if I
yeah,
understand correctly, yours was going with your own company. So, your own
right,
company, it was a program where you could go to different countries. So, that's really
right,
interesting because I usually tell people try to get to do that with your company where you are.
right.
If you work for a big enough company, international company, and they're willing to help you, at some
Yes,
point, just wait for the vacancy in Switzerland or another country actually to come, and that makes it so much easier when your company handles it. I know it was
yeah,
the same for me. I came to Switzerland the first time with it was a company job offer, so they took care of everything for me, and it's much easier than to make your first way into a country than trying by yourself to come and find a job. So I thought that was interesting to make that precision. If people are
yeah.
looking and thinking, how did she exactly got the permit and all of that? So that was handled by your country of origin, basically your company of origin.
Right,
They,
that's right. And I do have to say though that when the program ended and I was looking for my permanent role, I remember conversations also with uncertainty if it was actually going to happen, precisely because of the issues that you raised, Isabel, with being a non-EU national. And well, we still had to prove that I was worth the permit and to be handed that permit. And so I can sympathize with the challenge of making your way into countries that you're not a part of, and all the challenges that come with it. But I like you said, it did make it easier that I was sponsored by my employer.
Okay, so now going back to what you were saying, so you work in Switzerland, you're in HR, obviously, so that's always interesting. I think you'll share with us a little bit later about your HR experience. So now, what triggered the move to become your own boss, basically?
Yeah, another leap of faith. So I'm finding that creating a pattern for myself of doing a couple of courageous things based on my instincts. But about this time last year, I experienced a circumstance in my life where I really needed to take a step back from the patterns of my daily routine and my work, and really think about how I wanted to design my life from here on. And I think a lot of people went through struggles with COVID that also triggered reflection of what is it that you want your life to look like. So I had that moment around this time last year, and I really decided that I wanted to focus more on the things that I really really love to do, and also just imagine what else can I learn, right? At some point, I felt like I needed a change of pace. I needed to be stimulated differently. And I also needed a little bit more freedom about how I would operate with my work and with my life, having a young toddler too. So, a lot of values reflection, a lot of like exploring new possibilities and new opportunities that made me think maybe it was worth trying out something else. I have to say it was not an abrupt decision, so there really was a lot of thinking going into this. And I'm not one to make permanent decisions, so I can't tell you that this is what it's going to be like in the next 3 to 4 years. But I allowed myself the opportunity right now to just explore what it would be like to do coaching primarily, more than anything else. It was the part of HR I loved the most. It gave me the most energy. So I wanted to just spend more time doing that.
Very interesting. So now you can go into, so what is your business about? Because I think it's really aligned with values, which is always something I really suggest for everyone to follow, because if you're not aligned with values, it's not going to work. So how did you build your business so that you do this alignment and the values in your coaching?
Yeah, I started there. I started with really looking at what was important to me, and well-being. The topics of well-being and mental health are close to my heart. It was highlighted particularly in the last 2 years how central this was for people to feel like they're living good lives and healthy lives. So I wanted to anchor my business around those themes. But what I also found interesting is the topic around life transitions, because many times when we have changes in our lives, we treat them as events and we plan for these events, but we don't really look at, well, what does that mean for me as the individual, and what transformation I need to go through to adapt with life changes. And when we don't adapt well enough, that's when our well-being also suffers. And so I really wanted to look at that interplay. And so my coaching business is really focused on supporting people navigating through these important life transitions, with the end in mind that we want to keep to a healthy state of well-being and not compromising that, even if the changes are successful or not, but people get to the other side of it still in a good place in terms of their well-being. I am also a mental health first aid instructor, so I also run training programs around mental health first aid, and it helps me to, from a motivational perspective, to know that the work I do every day contributes to a bigger cause. And that's something that no matter how difficult the day is, you feel it's just worth it.
Yeah, I completely share that when you have a bigger goal, then it's not just doing a small piece, which is usually the case in a company. I mean, some people are very strongly linked to their company values. There's a few of those, not many, but there's a few of those where they have a very strong corporate values, and people really, I'm thinking about a few. I won't name them. I'm not publicizing names or what have you, but you just have these brands that are really like people are attracted to them, and once they work for them, it's like they live, eat, and breathe the brand. So that's great. But I have to say, when you're working for yourself, having your bigger goals is always helpful. So why
Yeah.
your why, basically, what are you trying to bring to this world in the end? Because you don't want to be just a coach or just a engineer or something like that. You want to do something that really motivates you. Maybe you're an engineer, but you're building the next NASA
Yeah.
rocket that's going to
Yeah.
land to Mars or something like
Yeah.
that. or
Yeah.
you're working as a coach, as you say, but you're dealing, helping people being lined up with their values. So it's always something a little bit bigger. And I would encourage everybody to have that answer for themselves, and
Yeah.
I call that the job plus plus. So you're not just an HR person or an engineer, but what is it? What else are you motivated by? What are you trying to build? So having all these things will actually help people find a job faster because
Mm.
they won't be wasting time knocking on the wrong doors.
Right.
Already you're someone where values are important to you. Let's say you don't want to work for a company that's not innovative or that's
Right.
not trying to recycle, depending on what it is that the company produces, then that's going to limit you. You will have your bucket list, I call it, of
Right.
companies that you want to communicate with. So it's better
Right.
to have a smaller spam or scan of things and to actually target smaller but very qualitative rather than big.
Yeah.
So
I have to agree, Isabel, and I know that sometimes for people who are really struggling to find a job, that might be difficult to adapt to, because when you're struggling and if you feel like you're operating off a disadvantage, volume seems to be important. Like the number of opportunities accessible feels important. And I think, that's also fair and that's also valid. The advice I often give is, as long as you're clear what you're signing up for and you know how those values line up or don't line up, if you're aware of it, you know how to deal with it. So if you end up with an employer where it's really not your ideal situation or your best case scenario, you at least know that walking into it. If people feel like they can't afford to limit their options, but I do say in the long term, right, being very strategic about your choices and knowing that you're going after choices that are more consistent with your values, I think in the long run also serves its benefit down the road.
So I guess you partially answered my next question, which was how to help people who are looking for their next career step. How can they become more effective? Basically, is
Mm,
the
yeah.
answer. You worked in HR in Switzerland, so
Yeah.
maybe there's some things that come to your mind where you say, "Oh, people, especially expats, there's certain do's and don'ts, basically."
Yeah, it's a good question, and I can imagine there's a diversity of audience and experiences and context. So maybe one advice will not fit, but if you allow me, there are a couple of maybe perspectives or ideas I'd like to offer, and see if that resonates with the audience, particularly for those who are expats. Because what I've observed is that if you're not from the country you're currently living in, the chances are higher that your careers will look a little bit lateral. They don't necessarily follow the straight logical line, because you're having to adapt kind of based on what jobs are available, based on maybe your language capacity, etc. So I what I'd like to offer as a perspective is to look at career as like a collection of experiences rather than this ladder that you climb. So if you look at career as experiences that build on each other, you don't necessarily end up looking for the dream job. You're looking for this dream experience that's going to be really helpful for you at this moment in time. And the more that you collect diverse experiences, the more you collect transferable skills, the more relevant you become in the workforce, because the workforce is also changing dramatically. We don't have the same organizational structures as we used to. We don't even use the same professional terminologies and languages as we used to, right? So the goal is to remain relevant despite the speed of change that we're seeing in the labor market. So that's one offer I'd like to provide, which is look at it as a collection of experiences and don't get stuck following a path that might not be existing in the future just because of the nature of the change. And the other thing I'd like to say is, people often say, I want to find my dream job. And to me, the terminology of the dream job might create this expectation of perfection, of this is it. And when there are so many more possibilities that are available out there if we get creative. So really look at, what's your dream direction and what are the collection of experiences that's going to help you get to that direction. And then you still remain adaptable based on the country that you're in, based on the changes that we see. And so I guess my advice out of all of this, is to look at job search from a strategic perspective. So if you really look at the big picture about where do you want to go, what are the experiences and the skills you want to build, and then you can create a strategy out of that instead of making it a transactional experience of here's my CV, now I wait for an interview. So that to me is not the best way to go about it. I'd rather look at it from a more strategic perspective.
And in your experience, are companies in Switzerland in general open to non-typical profiles or people who would maybe not tick all the boxes but have something interesting? Are they becoming a little bit more open to those profiles? Because as we know, until recently, I think after COVID, it's a little bit different because we learned to work
Yeah.
differently. A lot of things became digital. You could work from distance. So all these changes also created more flexibility. But do you see that flexibility also becoming more present in the selection process?
Yeah, definitely. I see a mix. I mean, I can't say, I can't generalize, and I also will not say that, everybody's moved or shifted their approach to hiring, but I definitely see the diversity. I do, especially because now we also have a lot more non-traditional organizations coming up. The startups are also coming up, and they naturally come with more innovative ways of hiring talent or bringing in the skills that they need. And so I do see examples where organizations rethink their hiring processes to really look for more non-traditional profiles. So again, looking at transferable skills, diversity of experience. Um, However, it's also important from the hiring manager's perspective to also be open about it, because you can change processes as much as you want. At the end of the day, the person making that decision, or the person who decides, do I move the CV forward or not, needs to build into that same mindset. And then for the person who is the non-traditional profile joining an organization, also needs to understand that they are non-traditional, so they are also open to the fact that they may be diverse in their environment if that has not progressed completely. So what I'm saying is the change needs to happen systemically, um, both from the person who's looking for the job, the person who is hiring, and from also organizationally in terms of culture and processes. I've definitely seen that happen, so I'm optimistic we're going to see more of that too.
What do you think recruiters are looking for the most right now in your part of Switzerland in terms
Yeah,
of
that's
skills or
yeah.
behaviors?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I'm mindful that I don't generalize, but I definitely see still a lot of opportunities in the space of, for example, automation and robotics. I still see a lot of opportunities in the space of digital healthcare, data literacy, that's coming up, digital marketing. These are some of the things that I see that continue to pop up. I also see. Um, I think for a lot of job seekers as well, they're not just looking for the job and the company, right? There's, to what we said earlier, I think there's a stronger pull for looking for purpose. There's a lot longer, a stronger pull looking at, how are companies acting sustainably and responsibly for the environment. So I think we're seeing some shifts in what we're looking for. And also, when organizations are now shifting, having to be faster and having to be more efficient, they're also looking for people who can get up to speed very quickly in terms of expressing their skill set. So we're seeing more like we need quick ramp up time. Potentially we might move into a place where we don't hire for permanent jobs all the time anymore, and we get creative in how we build our pool of talents and skills, so that when we need the skill, we have them at the right time in the right place. And we're more quickly able to evolve to the changing skills that organizations need.
That's very interesting. So definitely some potential opportunities as well for people who are looking. So from your
Yeah,
HR corporate background, when you worked in HR, how do you think candidates could create value and in exchanging with recruiters and headhunters? That's always a question I get is,
yeah,
well, how do I get in touch with headhunters? What should I say? How do I
yeah,
get engagement? So
yeah.
how do you see that either, maybe observing headhunters that you worked with or your own experience with
Yeah.
headhunters?
Yeah, definitely. I've been on both sides of the table, I would say. So I have much to say there. But let me point back to something I said earlier when I indicated looking at job search from a strategic perspective. So for me, this nurturing of the relationship with recruiters and headhunters in the ideal world starts well before you actually need a job. So if you plan your direction well, you can start looking at what types of employers do you want to work for, who might be your strategic partners in that process, and those partners could include recruiters and headhunters who are very familiar with the industry or the profession that you're looking for. And so engaging with them early and having conversations to get to know the industry, to get to know what are the biggest problems employers are trying to solve, what types of skills are they looking for, gets you familiar with these decision makers earlier. And so as the jobs progress and the opportunities come up, you're much more earlier in the on the radar or on their minds, for a potential fit. So I think having those conversations early, making them part of the process, staying in touch, not saying no to invitations. So I've had headhunters contact me for a conversation when I wasn't looking for a job, but I accepted those conversations because it's always a learning opportunity, and it's helpful to have that connection, nourished and existing over time, because it's always mutual, right? We always gain from each other, if we build those relationships. So that's something I'd ask people to consider is, how do you consider them as stakeholders in your job search strategy and make them part of the process
Exactly. I always say the best time to look for a job is when you don't need a job.
when you
So
don't need it. Yeah, yeah,
exactly. So you already, it's like building your career really is you're always meeting people. You're always connecting with headhunters at that time just to
right.
have conversations. And when you're actually not in need is when you're going to be natural, probably because you're
Yes.
not wanting it so much. So
Yeah.
it's going to come across as much more natural, low key, less pressure. And that's when
Mhm.
you build your relationship. So you should be doing this when everything is going well, actually. When you have a
Yeah.
good job, you're happy with it. That's
Mhm.
when you go to events. That's when you contact headhunters so that by the time maybe you want to change, you already have this network and all you have to do is just send a message or let them know. But you already have the names, you already have the contacts. Much harder to do when you're actually in the stage where you don't have a job.
Right. And
Because
you're
then
under time pressure. Yeah.
the pressure is much more, and then the pressure, and sometimes people maybe don't think about it, but the pressure might actually come across, and if the person doesn't have anything to offer, they might not want to engage at that time.
Right.
So
And I have to say recruiters and headhunters are also very busy, right? So we want to be mindful of their time. And if I may just expand this theme that we're talking about, I wouldn't only limit it to headhunters and recruiters. I actively encourage job seekers to seek out mentors in the industry as well. So as much as you can build your network across people who've been there for a longer amount of time, people who can open doors for you, who can create new connections, that will always go a really long way. It might not come with an immediate result overnight, but if you really think long term, it goes a really long way.
exactly. No, I agree with you. I think again, it's part of being strategic in how you're going to build your next steps, and trying to think about who I call that the go-to people and the go-to places, and that's something you want to do again when you're not necessarily actively looking is build those blocks. Who are the top five people I should be knowing,
Right.
and where are those people, and where
Yeah.
can I meet them and get in touch. So that's really what it's about. So in your opinion, which sectors, again mostly in Switzerland is probably where you are,
Mhm.
do you think are recruiting heavily right now in 2022?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the good news is, I think, our employment market is pretty healthy at the moment. I mean, I don't know if the trends have really shifted in the last year. That just maybe I don't have the latest, but I do see still a lot of, in the industry of robotics, healthcare. Um, a lot of startups in the sustainability space is also growing, and I think Switzerland, at least what I know in the German speaking part of Switzerland is also very healthy. So I think there are lots of opportunities there. And what I also observe is that sometimes the opportunities don't come up in job titles. And that's where I also encourage people to not look for job titles, but focus on experiences. Because when people don't know what they need, particularly new business owners or startups, they just look, I need somebody who can do X, Y, and Z without necessarily a job title attached to it. So it just opens up the conversation for more lateral moves and for more creative moves to take place. But definitely, I think healthcare, robotics, the digital space is really growing.
I think that will help people who are listening to figure out, because I know a lot of people contact me and they want to find positions
Yeah,
in the Swiss German part. So I think knowing the question is always, do I have the skills that match? So what you summarize there in a snapshot can help people figure out,
yeah,
whether they're a good match or not. But I like
yeah,
the fact that you say there's a lot of startups.
yeah,
I think indeed the startup world is quite successful.
yeah.
There's a lot of different ideas, and it's quite dynamic.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think this is where I also, if we move a little bit on the technicalities of it, where I also encourage people to really look at their CVs and look at how they show up on their CVs and on whatever professional profiles they're on, because the more that you can transform your profile into something that doesn't feel like you're in a box, but where you can really transfer your skills across industries or across different work environments, the chances are higher that people will be interested to talk to you. So I think that's important, particularly for people who have moved countries, because again, the guarantee that you can follow a very specific path is not there as much as it might. I'm making an assumption. Probably that's easier in your own home country. I certainly did not find that to be the case for mine. So the more you open up your profile to look like you're transferable, because of the skills and the experiences you've gained, the higher the chances of success as well.
I guess that's where the drafting of the resume comes into play, because if you're just stating what you've done and there's no real logic or flow in it or
Yeah,
story, the storytelling of the resume,
right,
people will just see a bunch of experiences, but they won't necessarily connect to
right,
business is doing. And that's really something that makes a huge difference. I know I've coached people who had great experiences, but when they would come to the interview, they just said, oh yeah, this is where I work, but they didn't make the connection with the problem
yeah,
that the company is trying to solve and how the
yeah,
experience is linked to that. So I say, if
yeah,
you're going for pharma, just pharmacize your resume. If you're going for beauty product format
yeah,
resume. I mean,
yeah,
companies need to see the match. They need to see that
right,
you a good fit. So you have to showcase a little bit what you could do for them. So there's
right,
definitely the drafting of the resume based on the values, what we want to achieve, and the targeted industries is going to help, so that we can see, because people always
yeah,
ask, well, how do you showcase this transferability of skills? Because
right,
most people do have them. But then
yeah,
it's a question of how do you write the resume so that it's clear to this new organization that they would be competent. And that's not
right,
necessarily an easy skill or an easy
right,
task for someone who maybe can't see it necessarily immediately, or you have to understand a little bit more the other side so that you can put
yeah,
yourself in the shoes of the recruiter who's looking for certain boxes that they want to tick, so if you're not showcasing, I know a lot of people still use that EU passport. I
yeah.
don't Definitely not the best one to showcase your skills. I
Not
mean,
anymore.
a success of different boxes, like a follow through of different boxes that you
Yeah,
put information in, and it's like complete
yeah,
blur. You really don't
yeah,
understand anything there. So
yeah,
that's not necessarily a good example, but there's a lot of templates there. So people will say, wait, hey, I just need a template and I'll just fill in the template. The problem with filling in the template is that you won't have this storytelling, you won't have this mold to your resume, and using all the things that you can use in communication
yeah,
to show that you would be a good hire. So that's where communication, branding is important, and that's
yeah.
where
Fully.
career coaches can help as well.
I fully agree, and I think I, I'm always careful that I don't submit the same CV twice because it shows the importance that, particularly to the person reading the CV, that what you've offered them speaks to their context, speaks to their culture, speaks to the problems that they're trying to solve. Um, and it still has to be honest, right? So at the end of the day, your CV still needs to show, although you've changed some words, it still needs to show a story that I'm the right fit for the organization that they're hiring for. So I always encourage people, as much as I know job search can feel like a full-time job, to really take a moment to look at, how they show up on the CV, in the interview, in their online presence, to really make their profiles relevant and interesting.
And basically have a branding to it. That's going
Yeah,
to make a huge difference.
yeah,
So could you share
definitely.
with us, because I think this question is interesting and can help also a lot of people. Could you share with us maybe what exceptional candidates do that others don't? Is there some, again, it's not necessarily one thing, it could be a bunch of
Yeah.
different behaviors, actions, words that
Yeah.
people use. What do you see that stellar candidates do?
Yeah, it's such a great question because like I'm reminded of interviews I've so thoroughly enjoyed doing. It's a tough job, so I respect the people who do interviews most of their days of the week. But when I think about exceptional candidates that I've interviewed, I think there are a couple of patterns that I notice. One is, they've really prepared. They've come into the interview, they've researched the organization, they know what the values of the organization are, they know what the top priorities might be, because these are things that's readily available on, employer websites or in networking conversations that you might have had. So the preparation of knowing, this is the context I am applying for, is very obvious. You mentioned this earlier, the way they talk about their story. So when interviewers ask an interview question that's particularly situational, it's often not about having a single right answer. It's the interviewers want to know, what types of stories do you tell, and what do these stories say about you and how you work and what you value. So being able to articulate really good stories in interviews is so important. I got such great advice from a mentor and a leader in the past, where she said, Keep writing stories about your work experiences, because these are the very stories you will end up using in future interviews." And I've just started doing that as a journal, because that's where interviewers will see how you perform, how you tackle difficult situations, how you communicate, and how you collaborate, as an example. So the preparation, the way they answer questions, and the stories that they share. I think exceptional candidates also demonstrate a lot of curiosity. They treat interviews as a two-way conversation to learn from each other. So they come prepared with really good questions. And they're good questions because they have context to the questions. They've researched the organization and what the top priorities are. So the questions are linked to that. And it puts interviewers in a really interesting spot, that they need to be ready to answer those questions too. So, it goes both ways. It's mutual responsibility. And then the follow up, like at the end of the interview, really being appreciative and grateful for the time, sending a nice follow up note to just thank the interviewers for their time or anything they've learned from that interview is always a nice touch, a nice ribbon to the package to leave behind. Those are some of the things that come to my mind if I think of exceptional interviews.
So obviously, to become good at all these things you just mentioned, you need to be prepared. You need to work on it, because I think very few people would be coming to the interview or and just be great and say all the right things. I think most candidates that would be great at this is because they've prepared themselves, they've rehearsed, and to tell a story, you have to tell it a few times so that it comes
Right.
smooth. And that's why I
Yeah.
again highlight preparation for the interview, because a lot of people say, well, when I meet someone in person, or when I do have interviews, it's okay. So the
Yeah.
problem is the resume. Problem is I can't write my resume, but when I have the interview, it's fine. Be
Right.
careful of that, because I think it's a little bit, maybe you think you're good at it because maybe you won't get the immediate feedback, but most people, they will just say what they've done,
Right.
and the history of what they've done, and think they've done a good job. but you may not be this exceptional candidate because someone right after you will actually do have this skill where they can say a good
Mhm.
story and they will snatch the job before you. So
And you remind me, Isabel, as you talk about that, because I don't know how prevalent this is, but many organizations I know, the more progressive ones, they don't just do an interview. There's often, like
right.
an assessment exercise after, or maybe a case study. So there's like it's an accumulation of diverse experiences that they want candidates to go through. And for me, I think going through a candidate where the CV presents a picture, the interview presents a completely different picture, and the assessment completes yet offers completely another picture, and then you end up feeling like, who am I interviewing, right? Which of the I'm sure they're all true in some shape or form. There's an overlap to that, but then they're so different that you can't, as an interviewer, form an identity that is clear to you. Makes it harder to hire that candidate because you're trying to explain why they came across so differently, and it's the same person. So what you want is to really be prepared across all the steps of the interview process, that at the end of it the interviewer feels like, I know this person, and I know who I'm hiring and who I'm bringing to the table at the end of this. So it's we can't underestimate the importance of preparation.
Exactly. People have to be careful because there will be this multiple rating, multiple assessment. So you have to be good at every level. I know when I've done interviews, when I was on the other side and I was a candidate, I went through those assessments. Most big companies will do this. I mean, it's common. And you do have to be performing at every stage. So the resume has to be great, then the interview has to be great.
Right.
Because what people will do is they will share information and they will reference check you.
I,
So
yeah.
that's why you need to be good everywhere. And you can't just say, oh, I'm okay just with the resume, or I'm okay just doing the interview, and that's enough. No,
Yeah.
you have to do everything from beginning to end, including in the reference checking, because most
Yes.
people don't have a list of references, or
Yes.
they will think about it when they're close to maybe the last interview. That should
Right.
always be part of what you have in your I call that the file that you have with all your
Yeah.
information, your
Yeah.
references, phone numbers, emails, etc., so that you're
Yeah.
ready to share that. And that shows also that you're a higher caliber candidate than someone who's just like, well, I don't know, and let me check. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
be prepared on your salary, what it is that you're looking for, being prepared on the type of work that you want to do, where you see yourself, knowing your profile very well, knowing your references, having references,
Yeah.
because that's going to make you the full package candidate. That's very
Right.
well important. So,
Yeah, and I think I like what you said, because I think in the end it's the consistency, right? It's the consistency that creates the trust in the side of the hiring manager, or the hiring recruiter, that builds the trust to say, I'm willing to put this person forward because I can see consistency and I know what I'm getting by putting this person forward. And all of the things you've mentioned definitely play into that too.
exactly. So, any last tips for our audience? Best
Yeah.
practice, advice, knowing that most people who are watching us, they're not yet in Switzerland or would love to be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just maybe to recap, I think really um, giving a real thought as to what is the career you're looking for and what it means to you. For some people, the professions are so intertwined to their identity. So when they're faced with setbacks and struggles in job search, it can be really difficult to bounce back from. So really have an honest look at what you want your career to look like, and how do you create a strategy around that puts you in the leadership role, in the driver's seat of it, rather than feeling like I'm just reacting to what the circumstances will offer me. I think will go a really long way. Build resilience and be kind to yourself. I know job search is hard, especially if you do it in a country that you're not a part of, or perhaps you don't speak the language. So kindness and self-care is really, really important. So I would say those would be my two last pieces of advice for our audience.
And I guess I'll add one last piece to that is opening your mind. I know it sounds
Yeah,
basic, but I always say, you don't know where the next opportunity will come from. So to keep an open
definitely.
mind, where maybe it's not going to come in the shape or form you thought, maybe
Yeah,
it's going to be a job you didn't expect. Maybe you will end up being an entrepreneur or starting your own
Yeah.
business. I know a lot of people do that as expats, like, well, I don't find the exact fit. So, I'm good at this and I have a few contacts and I know it's something that I can do well. And they just start their own business
Yeah.
or even consultancy, or you can start consulting online. You
Yeah.
can start, you have a lot of freelancer platforms now. So I
Yeah.
people, having the actual work permit to work in Switzerland is not necessarily a must. I mean, you can
Yeah.
just set, and that's actually one of my most watched video. That's what I say in there is
Yeah.
you can set yourself up online and just work online from anywhere, and you can live in Switzerland if you want,
Right.
and
Yeah.
just work online. So there's definitely now with technology again ways to take down those barriers and
Yeah.
look at things from a more flowing type of
Yeah.
situation.
And I think I really like that advice, Isabel, and it triggers me to think that there are also a lot of opportunities to take um, um, safe risks, right? So like maybe I haven't decided to become an entrepreneur, but I can try what it might feel like if I experimented over the next 6 months trying to do something or working through a platform. So I think there are ways for people to feel like they can open their minds to possibilities by trying things out small and early, and learning fast out of that before making like really big long-term decisions when there's so many things that are so unpredictable and volatile at the moment. So thank you for sharing that. That's a really good one too.
We've got a question, so I'll just pull it up.
Sure.
This is so that's when I actually will put my glasses on. This is, Willy Sands, any suggestions about what to know before you start your own business in Zurich?
Yeah, great question. I'm trying to think, a year ago when I started this, I mean, I definitely took the time to do different things. One is, what is it that I really want to do? And then really understanding the legalities of setting up a business in Switzerland. It's actually not so difficult to do that. But really understanding what are the different requirements that you might need at what point in time. There are a number of organizations around Switzerland who give almost free guidance to people who are even considering it, to really talk you through the legalities of it, what you might need to consider if your business is running in the country or if it's running internationally, things like insurances and taxation. But I have to say, the most important thing you need to know are what your own guidelines and boundaries are. So in my case, for instance, the decision to move out of corporate, of course, has a lot of financial implications for me and my family. So I also had to set up my own set of guidelines as to what are the boundaries that I can do this without compromising what might be important for me and my family. So again, values check, and then check the guidelines and the legalities, and also check what's interesting in the market, and where your niche can play will be interesting. So I hope that helps, and if it doesn't, reach out to me and I can share more, definitely.
Yeah, I think in Switzerland it's not complicated to start a
No,
business. Um,
no.
because actually it's a plus to be an expat in Switzerland because it's a place where I think the country would like to see more entrepreneurs, but
Mm,
the culture sometimes people are a bit afraid of it because
yeah,
they're not sure in terms of security and all that. So there's a lot for an expat who comes and is not afraid and everything. There's a lot of
yeah.
opportunities for sure.
I definitely see that. I think there's no shortage. If, like, as you said, if you're open-minded, if you're creative, if you're willing to take some safe risks, it can be really exciting.
So Willy Sen says, is there an email on how to connect? I put Karina's LinkedIn profile right below
Yeah,
the video. You have the profile, so you
yeah.
can go
Thank
on
you.
LinkedIn and message her
Yeah.
for sure.
Looking forward to hear from you, Billy.
And she says, thanks. Perfect.
You're welcome.
Great to know. Thank you, ladies. It really helps. Well, that's what we're
Very
doing this
glad.
streaming for.
We try.
And yeah, I definitely encourage anyone. Of course, we're not going to be completely because you and I started our business. So, of course, we're going to say it's the greatest thing. But
I do have to, it's hard to imagine life back in corporate, but I don't, you never close your doors, you keep your doors open, but it's been fun. It's been fun.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, everyone is different. For me, when I, just to share a little bit of why I started a business too, when I started a business, for me, it was a one-way ticket. So I always thought, okay, I've made the decision and now that's what I'm going to do. So there was no ifs or buts and
Yeah.
going back to corporate. But it's also because I've experienced corporate and I knew what I liked and didn't like about it, and that helped me make my decision. But I can understand for people who may not know, they're still between the two, or they haven't really explored all of corporate, so they think, well, maybe I still want to hang on to it because, again, I'm not sure either my own business, I can't get it really working because I'm missing some things, or I want the security of corporate. And I think everyone goes through that stage anyways,
Yeah.
especially at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I can completely understand, but it's almost like once you're really into your business, there's nothing like it. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, there's no comparison. And I always say, if you offered me a corporate job, six figures, seven figures, what have you, I would take it seriously because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love being in the space where I am, and it's the freedom, and that's really for me the core of my business is building autonomy.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm achieving doing what I'm doing is autonomy, and I know that no corporate structure could really offer that. And even if you have autonomy to some extent, you always have someone above you in corporate. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
No.
it's something that you have. But some people like that. They like having a close team and
Yeah.
being part of a brand again.
Yeah.
Because if you start your own business, typically it's going to be a smaller business. So some people like to say, "I work for
Yeah.
such and such brand." It's something
I,
they need. It's
yeah.
relatable.
Yeah, no, definitely. It resonates with me a lot, and I think it goes back to just being aware of what's important for you. And I think what was really helpful for me, because I went through that uncertainty of like, am I really going to make this decision? Is this really right for me? But I think, having enough time in between to test your assumptions, to talk to people, to imagine what, a different life, a different job, a different employer could look like, is really helpful to also create confidence in the decisions that we make, so that we walk into it, feeling like, okay, we've tested our assumptions, and now these are the plans that I set forward. So that's also something, none of this I think is an abrupt overnight decision. I don't think it should be. I think they're too significant. So just building in some time to reflect on what that transition could look like, is really important.
Yeah, and that's where career coaches can help as well in people who are not
Mm.
sure and trying to weigh out, the different possibilities. That's what I do in
Yeah,
when people want to pivot their career or change and all that,
yeah,
because you have to know who you are to make
yeah,
the right decisions. So you
yeah,
need to explore first before
yeah,
you go for it. Some people
yeah,
just jump right in it, but
yeah. I admire them.
say, yeah, let's go for it, let's start. But most
Yeah,
people I would say that I've met, they they still want to weigh things out. They still want to assess, what's their best option.
yeah,
So we've got Willie Sands again saying, this is exactly where I'm at. Thanks,
yeah.
Lee. So excited. You have no boss in
That's great. Excellent, Billy. All the best.
Any more questions before we close the streaming with Karina tonight? Just trying to see there,
Mhm.
maybe a minute to see if anyone else wants to ask a quick question. Anyway, I have your LinkedIn below,
Yeah,
and I think you're sharing also a workshop that you're going to have. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
put
definitely.
it as well. So if you want to connect with Karina, everything is below the video.
Excellent. Thank you.
Wow, the sun is still shiny.
It's a good time of the year.
See. Well, it was great to talk to you. I think
Thank
there's
you.
lots of golden nuggets in the streaming. Hope people get to share it to their friends and anyone who wants to travel and try their career elsewhere, and be prepared for it.
Thank you,
And-
Isabella. I enjoyed it.
yeah, me too. And let's keep in touch.
We definitely will. All the best. Thank you. Have a good week.
Thanks.